Hola, Kules, and we're back on Offside, BarcaFutbol's YouTube channel. And our topic today is none other than Dani Olmo. He's been a bit of a controversy dev since the beginning of his Barca career, I have to say. Not always through fault of his own, obviously.
Dani Olmo is the flavor of the season and has been for a while. It started with obviously his sign up that was contested, and then there were questions around whether it would be Dani Olmo or whether it would be Nico Williams, but we went with Dani Olmo. And he made a dream start, and everybody was like incredibly happy. And then he went through a slight injury. And then Barca went through a rough patch in the last 2 months. And then there was the shadow of his registration, which wouldn't have happened had Christensen not got injured. So obviously there was concern around whether Dani Olmo and Pau Victor would get registered. And as it would happen with Barca and La Liga, by 31st December, Barca were not able to furnish La Liga and the RFEF with the details of Olmo's registration, and hence they were deregistered. And then obviously the drama followed. There was lots of social media. And then there was a court case that happened and an appeal that went. And finally, the government has given an injunction for the temporary registration of, which means by now they are again re-registered for Barcelona. So this registration thing has been there for a while, for the last 5 years, I would say. It isn't something that we, as Barca fans, were used to in the last decade, but over the last 4 or 5 years, it has been a common instance with Barca's financial issues and La Liga's strict rules around who can be registered and who cannot be. And we have often struggled because the club is still not in 1:1. So obviously that caused issues. But today, what we are trying to look into is that there has always been a lot of discussion around Dani Olmo's registration, what value Dani Olmo brings in, and a lot of anger from other clubs as well on his registration. The question is, how much does Dani Olmo bring to Barcelona when we actually look at the data or we actually look at the game? Is he really worth all that effort? Is he really worth all that anger? Is he really worth all that frustration, irritation? Yes, there's a rule part of it for sure. But what's the worst case scenario in case this temporary injunction does not stand? Let's say it gets rejected in 3 months' time. Does it impact Barca really that much? Is there an option in this world where we can say that, okay, can Barca take advantage of the situation and actually work out a transfer which works out for everyone? To discuss all that and more, we thought we would look at some of the data, some of the games that he has played. And as usual, we'll do a little bit of tactics and a little bit of data to analyze, and then bring some thoughts on Dani Olmo, his registration, what he means for Barca. Is he irreplaceable, or what should be the next step?
The data will tell us how effective he has actually been throughout the season, and is he worth the hassle? Well, the tactics will be a bit different. I'll just look into how to optimize his role. So if he is to say, how do we get the best out of Olmo? A couple of months back, we did a video on Dani Olmo, and we said these things right here, you can see in the left top corner, are actually the things that Olmo brings to the table. This is what his player profile is mainly made out of. And I do want to focus on that, but mostly on his role versatility, because this is something that heavily impacts the way Olmo actually contributes to this Barca team. Now, initially, Dev, if you remember, we said Dani Olmo would play either as a inverted left winger, being here out wide and going inside and going to the box and so on and so forth, or he would be a number 10 with similar instructions, but more central presence. Now, we did get one thing right and one thing wrong, because he never really played as a left winger, but he did play a lot as a number 10. And this is arguably still one of his best roles to date. And this is where most of his impact does come from. Now, I do want to focus on the number 10 role, but this is not the only role that he's been given. He's also been played under Hansi Flick as a right center midfielder in a midfield 3 with a single pivot. And this changes the way Olmo impacts the game dramatically. But let's start with the basics with his number 10 role, because this is still, I would say, the role that has molded Olmo as the player that he is today. Now, in this role, obviously, Olmo does get some freedom. He gets to roam Dev's favorite zone 14 in this area right here. So he can go left and right as he pleases. And he does do that, to be fair. He does interact with the left winger a little bit. He does interact with Lamine on the right side, and he does interact with the midfielders below him. However, this needs to be said. The way to get the best out of a player is always to optimize their profile and make the most use out of the traits that they have, which would be these ones you can see in the left top corner. Now, however, there's always a danger in certain roles that he has. In this role in particular, Dev, we discussed this a lot on our podcast and our previous videos. Olmo is always in danger of becoming this moments player, we call it, because he doesn't really impact the game beyond a couple of big moments throughout a game, and then he can still flip the game on its head when given the chance to do so. However, he is not as involved. He is not really present, so to speak, throughout the whole 90 minutes. And the reason for that is, in short, distances, right? Because if you see the way Olmo has been used, and I'm sure Dev can show this in the stats later on as well, Olmo is tasked to be this anchor up high, and Flick wants him. I believe that Flick instructs him even to stay up here and occupy these areas right there, and even stay there no matter what at times. And this means the distances between him and, let's say, Lamine Yamal, between Pedri and Caicedo, or even worse, between Kubarsi or Koundé and Olmo are very big. And this makes Barca very direct. It makes them very vertical. It makes them chaotic, because this setup does not really scream control. It screams speed. It screams directness and verticality, which can be a good thing if the opposition plays in a system that allows Olmo the space to move between these lines and actually receive the ball from Caicedo or Pedri, and then do his thing where he can carry the ball forward. He can maybe be around the edge of the box, and he can shoot and be in these shooting positions and then score goals as he normally does from these positions. Now, the problem is, if this area is heavily congested and Olmo cannot be accessed, what happens? Exactly what we said earlier, he becomes a moments player, because he doesn't really touch the ball. He doesn't go down here. He doesn't go down there. He doesn't really drift all the way to the right, all the way to the left. And he can still do that. That is a possibility that he has. But I feel like it is the instruction from the coach to remain in advanced zones, because, to be fair, this does give Barca more lethality. It gives them more direct goal threat at all times if Olmo can be accessed. However, if he cannot, we do fall into the trap of becoming this team that has a moments player in their ranks, as opposed to a player who can influence all phases of play. Now, when you contrast that to the right center midfield role, which is this one, this is more of a box-to-box role. This is a role that allows Olmo to start here and then drop deeper when necessary to connect with the players. And if you look at it this way, look at it through the lens of distances, you can immediately see that he is far more accessible to certain players, and Barca as a team are far more connected, right? The network between players, look at the triangles that happen on this side, on that side. You can have connectivity between players that is easily or more easily created, and this gives Barca more control. However, it does come at a cost of the lethality that I mentioned earlier, because now Olmo has more responsibility in build-up and cannot offer you the same amount of lethality higher up the pitch. Now, obviously, he can still be a box-to-box player, which in his nature he still is, but it does come at the cost of the lethality we talked about. Now, the solution to optimize this would be to deploy Olmo in a role that fits the game state best. If the opposition are leaving huge gaps between the lines and there's no compactness, you can have Olmo in this free roaming final third zone 14 role. However, if you need more control in games, if you need to calm down and circulate the ball better and be more stable in possession, you put Olmo in the right center midfield role. And I think this is basically the key to unlocking or getting the best out of him, because each of these roles comes with a cost, but you have to weigh out the positives and negatives and decide which one suits the game state best. And of course, Olmo can adjust himself. If he sees that this is not working, he's not getting the ball enough, he's not really influencing the game enough, he has to adjust on his own with or without Flick's instruction. And this is difficult. It's not easy to do. However, we have seen the likes of Pedri and Gavi do it themselves. They would drop deeper, get out of the structure, peel wide, go forward, go back, all to get the ball and influence the play more. Olmo needs to be able to do the same thing. So to conclude, we have two roles, and each is suitable, more suitable rather, to a certain game state. It's up to Flick and Olmo himself to recognize these and then act accordingly.
When he can play between those lines and can find those pockets of space, he's amazing. And then Barca have that advantage, right? That really helps us to destabilize defenses. But when the opposition figures it out and when that channel is blocked, almost the efficacy can be quite low. And that is evident in the last 6 seasons of his career, if you look at the data. So we have a good player. I don't know whether he's being used by Flick in the same way like De La Fuente used him in Spain. We can analyze that. But with Flick's usage, his efficacy in the recent months has become a lot less. Now, the question is, if we take that into consideration and take into consideration his cost, his price, and given the situation that FC Barcelona is in right now, does it make sense to think about a transfer where we find a good team for him and then we find a replacement? Would that be more beneficial for the team than what Olmo is bringing to the table right now?
That's the question here. Does he bring enough to warrant big splashes of cash, right? That's the thing. And I feel like he's still a player that can be the moment's player, but also impact the game at a higher level. But yes, as you said, I think it is Flick's instruction that's chaining him to this number 10 role where he's often on an island. Obviously, he scored goals, he has made assists, and he has won us games in this first half season, so to speak. But it always feels like Olmo can be doing more or should be doing more and should be impacting the team a bit more.
This is basically, if you look into what Olmo is over the last part of his career, the player that is more or less he's been the same, but I would say he was more effective in Leipzig than he has been in Barcelona. If you look at the holistic, you will see he's great overall in a few things, but there is no one or two things standing out. Lamine has a couple of things that are like absolutely 9.7, 9.8. You don't see that in, you look into this radar chart for Olmo. If we go a little further, and that here is, and you can see the 5 seasons he spent at RB Leipzig and then the 1 season he's been at Barcelona. And if you look into matches played, goals, assists, you can see has never really played throughout the season. Maximum was 32 with Leipzig. But more than half the season, generally, he is injured. So that's number one. If you look at goals, 5 is the highest, and that's in Barcelona. And that's in 6 years. A player who is in the whole season never scored more than 5 goals in the last 6 seasons. Assists, even lesser than that. So from an attacking player, the two things that you would expect from an attacking player, goals and assists, not much there, right? From that perspective. Doesn't mean that he's not effective. It's just it's not there, right? If you look at the data from that perspective. Any thoughts on this, Dom? We have some more data, but would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, at this point that you made of him not having a clear strength, I think, yeah, in Leipzig, there was a clear strength. Obviously, he was a player who made a lot of key passes, a lot of player who was a creative force beyond those final things like goals and assists. Obviously, you need those from a player like Olmo. But yes, at Barca, he has been quite prolific at the start. He's been scoring goals. He's already matched his maximum tally of goals, which is good. But now, can he sustain that? Because now he's dropped off, right? He's not really producing at the same rate that he used to. And the question is this just a slump or is this almost somehow returning back to the mean, right? That's what we often say. And as Barca suffered as a team, he also obviously suffered as an individual player within that structure. But now, can he breach that ceiling? And I would argue that the system as it is currently and his role as it is currently is limiting him very much. And that's why we've seen such a big de-acceleration in his stats. And to me, that's a concern because if it doesn't change things, these numbers that we see on the screen, they won't grow that much anymore.
Yeah, and there's a thing for fans, for us, for everyone, right? If you look at the media furor about Olmo, it would seem like that was Lionel Messi's registration that was being discussed because apparently this is the difference between FC Barcelona winning or losing. But I don't think he's that player. I just don't think he's that player who can make the difference between winning and losing. He's a good player. He's definitely a good player. He's definitely somebody, if you can have him, and if your finances are good, you can. But he's not this player who will make that difference consistently game after game. Once in a while, for sure. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of many things that are happening around this registration saga. And one will never know the truth about what rules did La Liga have, what did Barcelona present. There'll be always this and that back and forth. And once that's gone into the courts, it will be messy. It is messy. But for a player, if he was not registered, I don't think it would mean the end of the world for Barcelona and for the season. That's just what I'm trying to come up.
In his current form, yes, I would agree with you, Dev. The way he's playing right now, the way he's being used right now, he is not a player that we should be breaking the bank for. In short, yeah.
Exactly. And here is progressive passes, carries, and so on and so forth. Again, not just from an attacking perspective, but from a playmaker perspective, because obviously Barca play in that manner. They depend on playmaking a lot, attacking playmaking. But if you look at even this, these numbers aren't some insane numbers. Like, they're okay, they're fine. But it's not that he's affecting the game as an attacker consistently that much. Yes, there have been good goals that he has scored. Yes, there are some games that he has won us for sure. But consistently, that impact hasn't been there. And it's the same when it comes to playmaking. And you can look at the data, and it clearly says that while he's good in all of this, and there's a base level, a sustenance level quality that comes, but these are not like record breaking or chart topping numbers in any sequence of the term.
If anything, this chart just screams injury history, because when he's fit, and he's only been fit for the full season once in the last 5 years, when he is fully fit, he can get good numbers like these. The graph that goes up to the 175, yeah, that's his full season, right? So if he's fully fit, he can give you good numbers, very high numbers, but he's never done that, right? He very rarely stays fit throughout the whole season. So you have to plan for him, basically plan for him being unavailable, which is a big issue if he pertains to be an elite player at an elite level, right? It's a big problem to me.
Absolutely. And then, and it doesn't end here. So I tried to put it on a matrix in terms of the key parameters of the games. And then I tried to see the percentile location, like where does he fit in La Liga this season, right? So if you look into goals, he's 17th. Look into assists, he's 66th. Second assist, 118th. Dribbles, 19th. Offensive duels, 56. Long passes received, 55. Recoveries, 36. Crosses, 46. A lot of this are below top 30 in the whole of La Liga for that particular capability, per se, right? And these are like about 16 different parameters that we are looking into. In none of this is he in the number 10, in the top 10. People will come and jump on me saying that I'm being reactive. No, I'm not. He's a great player. He's very silky, artistic. When he's on song, you love watching him play, and so on and so forth. It's all true. God forbid if this injunction gets overturned in 3 months' time, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference to Barca's season.
Yeah, it's very difficult to compare this, because I'm guessing this is Olmo against all players in the league. Right, so it's not just players in his position. So it's very difficult to compare that, but still, he should be cracking the top 10 in at least some of the categories, right? He should be getting more received passes, more progressive runs, because these are the things that he usually does, right? And in a Barca system that prioritizes possession, still does to a certain extent, for a player of almost importance to that whole system, to that whole team, he should be receiving more passes. Now, and also having the number of passes as well, and second assist and touches in the penalty area and offensive duels, all those things are the things that Olmo can excel in, but he doesn't. Now, partly due to his injury, of course, is not always available, but also partly because the system doesn't put him in a position to actually get high numbers in these categories. Now, would Olmo be more effective in a certain role, have better numbers? I think he would be. But now the question is his ceiling, if we get him to that role that he prefers or wants or needs, would he actually crack these numbers, crack the top 10 and so on and so forth? That's a big question.
A little bit more on how his shots are and so on. But the only thing that I would like to talk about, again, if you look into the data per se, and it tells you the conversion ratios that he has, right, from the shots that he has. And you can see the positioning, and you can see the zones from which he takes his shots again. Not an immense amount of influence that is being generated for Barca being much more attacking or Barca delivering a lot more the end product from that perspective. If you look into his XG bucket distribution also, he doesn't create that much, or he doesn't assist that much for the players who are out there, right? So it's not that he's creating or contributing from that end product perspective. Yes, destabilizing defenses might be one of the things that he is good at and that Flick takes advantage of. But lately, if you have seen how teams have squared up, they have figured out Flick's way of playing, and Barca haven't had the best of time in just managing that, right? And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon for the rest of the season. The other thing is losses, and I'll pass it back to you, Dom, after that, is look at the number of losses and look at the percentile at every position, right? He's obviously a player with flair. He obviously likes the dribble. He obviously likes making that pass. He obviously is very soothing on the eye and so on. But for a team that plays on the counter, for a team that plays with a ridiculously high line, for a team that takes risk. This number of losses is concerning.
To be honest, if he's higher up the pitch, as Flick normally instructs him, and if you lose the ball higher up the pitch, okay, fine. There's no good time to lose the ball, right? You always want to keep the ball, but there are some zones that are less risky. Let's put it that way, to lose the ball. And the deeper you go, the higher the risk, obviously. But yes, it's never good for your main playmaker or player who has to be stable, and the player who has to consistently provide things, to be losing the ball far too much. If he's losing the ball in dangerous areas, and if he's the thing is, I often see Olmo overthink things, right? He's not choosing the most optimal passes, and that's often the cause of his losses. That concerns me. If he overcomplicates things, if he tries things that are not necessary, and then because of that lose the ball, that's a concern to me. So we would need context with these losses, but from the eye test, my memory, which can be hazy, granted, I do remember him making the wrong decisions often, and sometimes too often, and that's a concern to me.
If you look into his passes are good, but again, Dom touched upon it a little bit earlier, that maybe it's because of his injuries, maybe because he doesn't get to play the whole season. If he did, then maybe his passes would have been far more effective. But there haven't been that many instances when because of his pass or because of his, ability to split the defense, Barca has got the advantage on their half.
The XG chain and XG buildup are a big positive to me, because he is at the top there. Like you see, it's almost at the top. So that's a positive. This means that when he's involved in the buildup, that he gets the ball to the right areas. Now, the problem is he's not been as involved lately. And if you can't access him, can't use him, then all the good things that he can do are basically non-existent. To me, this is exactly the issue. He can be effective. He can be involved, but through his role and maybe through Flick's structure, we don't know, he's just not being that player, not being the center of Barca's build-up or Barca's attack at all. So that's a big concern.
There you have it. Some data and some stats in terms of how he has performed, per se, and where his strengths lie. Nowhere are we saying that he's not good. He's great. And for the time that he has played, definitely has brought a different style and a different impact into Barca and at the attacking end of things. But for the last 2 months or so, especially mostly after his injury, I think before injury, he was in a different zone altogether. But after the injury, he has never been the same player. And then teams have also worked this out. Barca's confidence is also not at that level. So all in all, it hasn't been smooth sailing. And time will tell how the second half of the season goes. We would be in a far worse condition if something happened to Pedri, or something happened to Leva, or something happened to Lamine, or because they're really making the difference game in, game out consistently.
Olmo is a good player when he can be used properly. He can be actually involved much more, and when his traits can actually be optimized, which we try to emphasize in this video. It's not so much about, okay, Olmo is good or bad. It's more like, are we making the most out of Olmo with the price that we're also paying? But yeah, guys, that is it for us this week. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, on X, on TikTok, and our blog. Of course, we'll be coming up with more content as we go. But as we always say, stay safe, and Visca El Barca.